Hello, math students. Welcome back to Module 4, Expressions and Equations. This is Lesson 23, and it is called Multi-Step Problems in the Real World. Our goal for today we will analyze equations with two variables to make tables and graphs of the relationship. The question that I want you to think about in this lesson is, how do you label a graph and why is it important? All right, so we're going to practice this with a try this problem. Evan can type 40 words per minute. Let W be the number of words typed and let M be the number of minutes spent typing. Okay, so the first thing that we have to figure out is our quantities are helping us, and this is saying Evan can type 40 words per minute. So that means that in 1 minute he can type 40 words. If a minute of time doesn't go by and he's actually not typing, will he produce any words? The answer is no, he will not. So if you have 0 minutes, then you're going to have 0 words because he didn't type anything, okay? What if he types for 5 minutes? Well, we know that in 1 minute he can do 40, so then you would just have to do 40 5 times because he did it for 5 minutes. All right, let W be the number of words typed, and let M be the number of minutes spent typing. Okay, so now we have to go back, and just like in our lesson yesterday, we had to figure out what is the independent and what is the dependent variable. And so we were talking about that just a minute ago, that if you don't have any minutes typing, no words will be typed. So I'm thinking time is still going to tick by, whether I'm actually moving my fingers on the keyboard and typing, time is still going to go by. The time doesn't stop. So time, for me, would be the independent variable. And since we're talking specifically about minutes, then I'm going to say the independent variable is M. And remembering that M is the number of minutes typing, right? And then I'm going to say the dependent for this one is W, because we can't have any words typed without minutes passing. So W stands for words typed, and these will not exist without actually moving our fingers for a certain number of minutes. All right, so now it says Evan can type 40 words per minute. Let W be the words typed and M be the number of minutes spent typing. And then what we have to do, now that we have the independent variable and the dependent variable, then we know that it's 40 words per minute, right? And so the equation that we could come up with is the number of words times the number of minutes gives us the total words typed, right? Total words typed, total words typed. So that would be an equation that we could come up with. That is the number of words times the number of minutes gives us the total words typed. And we actually know that in 1 minute, so if we put minute as the independent, because remember in our lesson yesterday we said this was the independent, so our independent is our minutes, and then our W is our words typed, so that's the dependent. And so we learned that in 1 minute, Evan can type 40 words, right? If he types 0 minutes, then that means there are 0 words typed. If he types 2 minutes, then he has 80 words. And if he has 5 minutes typing, then he has 200 words, okay? And so what we've basically done is we've just made a picture of the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. And if we look at our equation, then we could say that there are 40 words for every number of minutes, and that gives you the total words typed. So that's another way to look at it, as an equation, okay? Now, there's something else that you need to know about graphing relationships, and when we graph relationships, there's very specific information about the graph. This is the graph that they're talking about, and some of you may have seen this type of graph before, some of you may not. This is actually a number line, and it collides with another number line. This is a horizontal number line, and this is a vertical number line. And the way we count them is where they collide, it always starts at 0. So this is called the origin of the graph, and because that's where it starts, so origin means graph. And then the value where they connect is always 0. And then, depending on what you're doing, you go across and you put some number values along the bottom of your graph. Now, you're not going to want to put any number values in until you figure out what goes where. And so the whole reason that I was teaching you about independent variables and dependent variables is typically on graphs, we represent the independent variable along the x-axis. So this right here is called the x-axis. And the reason why it's called the x-axis is because this is where all of the x values live. This vertical line is typically called a y-axis. And the reason why it's called the y-axis is because this is where the y values belong. Now, in the previous lesson, I also reminding you, the independent is typically the x value, and the dependent is typically the y value. So now it should be making sense to you. So along the horizontal, we put the independent variable, and along the y-axis, we put the dependent variable. Okay, so this is all information that you have got to make sure that you learn and memorize, because it's the same for every different scenario that we work with. So the independent variable for this specific problem that we're working with is the number of minutes. I'm going to write minutes right here. Okay, and the dependent variable that we're working in this story problem is words typed. Okay, so we've identified the x and y values with their names, minutes and words typed. And now if we look at it, we have 0 here, and then we just start counting. So I would say this is a 1, this is a 2, this is a 3, this is a 4, this is a 5, this is a 6, and this is a 7. And then we learned that the relationship is that when you have 1 minute of typing, you can produce 40 words. So then I'm going to count by 40. So this would be 40, 80, 120, 160, 200, 240, 280, 320, and 360. So that's how I count it. Now, you don't always have to count the same way as me, but you have to be able to show your data on your graph. So that's why I choose the countings. The other thing that you have to be very careful of when you're identifying your counting on your x-axis and your y-axis is that your interval for each axis has to remain the same. So you will notice all of the numbers that I counted on the x-axis, they increased by 1s. So I'm counting by 1s on this axis. Whereas on this axis, I'm counting by 40s. And so I consistently have to go up by 40 in order for this to be a consistent interval. So interval means that the value in between each set of numbers is exactly the same. So there's from 0 to 40 is 40, from 40 to 80 is 40, from 80 to 120 is 40, from 120 to 160 is 40, from 160 to 200 is 40, from 200 to 240 is 40, from 240 to 280 is 40, from 280 to 320 is 40, and from 320 to 360 is 40. So the intervals have to be the same. Just like from 0 to 1 is 1, from 1 to 2 is 1, from 2 to 3 is 1, from 3 to 4 is 1, from 4 to 5 is 1, from 5 to 6 is 1, from 6 to 7 is 1. So the interval on the bottom is 1. Okay? So that's how we create our graph. And now our last thing that we have to do is we have to plot the ordered pairs. And we've talked about ordered pairs in the past, and hopefully you remember. But this is why we're using the ratio table, because this ratio table gives you the ordered pair. And we always list them with the X value first and then the Y value. So in this one, I have a parentheses, and you have to use parentheses because when you just list the numbers, people are going to get confused as what you're writing. So the parentheses tell mathematicians, oh, ordered pairs, got it. So you would write the X value first, so that's 1, comma, 40 is the Y value. And then you put a parentheses. On the next one, parentheses, the X value is 0 because when I have 0 time, I have 0 words typed. So that's called a 0. The origin, this is called the origin, or it's called 0, 0. All right, so then the next ordered pair would be parentheses. In 2 minutes time, I have 80 words typed. And then the last one that I have on here, in 5 minutes time, I have 200 words typed. Okay, so all 4 of these are called ordered pairs. And so now what you do with the ordered pairs after you create them is you actually graph them. So remember, this is minutes. The first number value is your minutes because it's the x-axis, the x value. So this one is telling me I have to go to the right 1. And the reason I know I have to go to the right is because this is a positive 1. So I'm moving on my graph to the right 1, and then it says go up 40. So I'm going to the right 1 and up 40 and putting a dot. So that's what I do. The next one says go to the right 0 and up 0. So I'm sitting right here, so I put a dot. Okay, because I didn't move. I didn't go to the right any, and I didn't go up any. I stayed at 0, 0, so I have to put my dot right there. The next one says go to the right 2, so 1, 2, and up 80. So I go 1, 2 to 80, and I put a dot. Okay, and then the last one says to the right 5, so I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it says to go up to 200, and 200 happens to be about there, and without lines, it's kind of hard, but you see we're now plotting the points on the graph that we have made, okay? And so that's how you plot ordered pairs on graphs. And I'm just going to really quickly try. And because I don't have a ruler and nothing is perfect, they're going to look wiggly and maybe not as equally spaced as they should. But basically what you're doing is your dots should collide with the values they're attached to. So this 1 collides with the 40, this 2 collides with the 80, and this 5 collides with the 200, which is what it's supposed to be on your graph. Okay? And so now you know how to plot your ordered pairs, which were built from your independent variable and your dependent variable, so that we can see the pattern or the relationship that is working with this. So if we're looking at that, if we went in 1 minute, there's 40 words. In 2 minutes, there's 80 words. So how many words would be after three minutes? So I go to the right 3, and I go up to 120. You got it. I go to the right 4 and up to 160. And now you're seeing that there's a pattern with our graph so that each one of those intervals can be shown on the graph, whether it's written in your table or not. Okay? All right, so today we will analyze equations with 2 variables to make tables and graphs of the relationship, which is exactly what we just did. How do you label the graph and why is it important? Labeling the graph is probably one of the most important things to do, because if I just took this graph without any of the rest of this information, a mathematician could tell me exactly what's happening, because we told them that by putting the minutes here, that it's the independent variable, it has to sit on the x-axis, and the words typed depends on the minutes typing. So the dependent variable is always on the y-axis, and it has to be labeled. So this is why it's important to label everything so that someone who's reading your graph can understand what's going on. All right, kiddos? That's all I have for you in this lesson. Talk to you soon. Bye.